They vanished without a trace. Two young lovers swallowed by the wild silence of the Rocky Mountains. For 10 years, their faces remained on missing person flyers, their names whispered in campfire stories and police briefings. But when a storm unearthed a sealed tunnel deep in the mountains, the truth clawed its way back into the light, rotting, frozen, and not alone. Their bodies were found together, but not how anyone expected, and someone else may have never left. Now, the question isn't what killed them, it's who was watching when they died. The sun hung low behind the jagged peaks of the Rockies, bleeding orange light across the sky like a wound slowly closing. Lila stood at the overlook, arms stretched above her head, breathing in the thin alpine air as if trying to fill her lungs with something more permanent than oxygen. Behind her, Sam adjusted the strap on his backpack, snapping a photo when she wasn't looking. "I saw that," she said with a smile, without turning around. Sam laughed under his breath. "You always know. That's because I always watch you watching me," she said, finally turning to face him. Her smile flickered, held for a moment too long. "Let's get one together." They posed against the backdrop of the ridgeline, framed by cliffs and open sky. Her hand rested lightly on his chest. The camera blinked, captured the shot, and it was done. The last photo anyone would ever see of them alive. They followed the trail deeper into the woods. The familiar sound of boots crunching over dried leaves, birds calling in the distance, and the occasional creak of shifting pines surrounded them like a lullaby. But underneath it all was something else, something that hummed low between them. "You've been quiet today," Sam said finally. Lila hesitated. "Just thinking. About." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked up toward the slope ahead. "About what comes next," she said. "There's something I need to tell you." Sam stopped walking. "Is it bad?" "I don't know yet." She kept walking. "Depends on you." The wind picked up as they passed a weathered trail sign. "Northwest Pass, closed for season." Sam tilted his head. "Shortcut." Lila didn't answer. She stepped over the broken chain without looking back. Later, hikers would say they remembered the couple, smiling, affectionate, normal. No signs of distress. But no one followed them past that sign. No one saw what waited beyond it. 10 years later, the mountains remained unchanged, towering, brutal, and silent as ever. But the wind had shifted. Something old stirred beneath the surface. Rick Donovan, a weathered local guide with a beard like pine bark and lungs trained on thin air, had spent most of his life mapping forgotten trails and abandoned mining routes. He was leading a group of hikers along a less-traveled ridge when he noticed it, a jagged scar of fresh earth cutting across the slope, where the rock had recently given way. "Landslide," he muttered to himself, crouching by the edge. Dust still clung to the air like ash. Below, tangled roots and fractured timber jutted out from the exposed hillside like ribs from a grave. He waved the group on. "Take 5. Stay up here." The others nodded, grateful for the break. Rick descended carefully, boots sliding against the loose shale. Something caught the sunlight. Metal? No. Wood. A weathered, time-stained beam. He knelt and brushed away the debris. His fingers struck something solid. It wasn't a tree trunk. It was a door. No, not a door. A braced wooden entry, rotted, reinforced, and sealed with thick, rusted bolts. Something old. Something hidden. His heart picked up. Rick had explored dozens of closed shafts over the years, collapsed mines, Prohibition-era smuggler routes, but this was different. The craftsmanship wasn't industrial. It was makeshift yet deliberate, almost defensive. He pushed against the frame. The wood groaned but gave way just enough to reveal blackness beyond. The kind of black that swallowed sound and memory. Rick turned on his headlamp and leaned in. Cold air whispered out like a sigh, tinged with rot and something ancient. Then he saw it just inside the entrance. A backpack, molded canvas, faded green, half covered in earth like it had been waiting, and beside it 2 human shapes, wrapped in brittle, aged fabric, bound tightly, mummified. Rick stumbled backward, bile rising in his throat. His hand found his radio. "Sheriff," he choked. "You need to get up here. Now, I found them. I think I found the missing couple." The mountains had kept their secret for a decade. Now they were ready to speak. Deputy Riley Monroe had seen a lot in her 10 years with the sheriff's department, but nothing like this. The scene was quiet, too quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. A perimeter was already in place when she arrived, sirens long silenced. The only sound now the rustling trees and the rhythmic whine of generator-powered lights illuminating the shaft. The entrance yawned open like a mouth broken wide by time. She ducked under the yellow tape and met Sheriff Hal Briggs near the mouth of the tunnel. His face was pale beneath his sun-scorched skin, and he didn't speak for a moment, just handed her a flashlight and pointed. The descent was slow, each step crunching on gravel and splintered wood. Old beams groaned above her, some warped, others splintered. As her light swept the interior, it caught the edge of something unnatural, too deliberate to be accidental. At the far end of the tunnel, the air grew frigid. Not just cold, hollow, like the inside of a sealed tomb. That's when she saw them. Two bodies wrapped in tattered hiking gear and what appeared to be cloth. Strips of fabric wound tightly from shoulders to feet, bone-thin outlines frozen in time. Their skin, where visible, had withered to leather. Eyes sunken, lips drawn back from teeth. Mummified, preserved by the cold, by the dry, still air of the tunnel. Riley crouched beside them, her breath fogging as she examined the scene. No signs of trauma, no weapons, no obvious injuries, but the way the bodies were posed, flat on their backs, arms at their sides, like they'd been arranged. "Who the hell buries people like this in the middle of a sealed tunnel?" she whispered. The coroner's assistant stepped closer with a cautious frown. "That's not natural mummification," he murmured. "Someone wrapped them before they died, maybe. Could have been ritualistic. Or staged. But who?" Riley asked. "And why here?" She rose slowly, her flashlight scanning the ceiling. Symbols carved into the beams. Faint, jagged, like someone had clawed them in. Briggs' voice crackled through the radio. "You seeing what I'm seeing?" She looked again at the corpses. "Yeah," she said. "And it's not just a tunnel. This was built. Someone made this. And whatever happened to them?" She looked over her shoulder at the darkness beyond. They didn't walk in here alone. The two backpacks sat side by side on the evidence table like ghostly time capsules, crusted with dirt and mountain mold. Sheriff Briggs watched from behind the glass as the forensic team worked under low, sterile lights, gloved hands meticulously peeling back the decade-old layers of grief. Riley entered quietly, her eyes drawn to the name tag still stitched on one of the faded straps. Calder. Sam Calder. They had names now, not just corpses. Sam Calder and Lila Reyes, missing since August 15, 2015. National search, headlines, dead ends. And now, suddenly, here they were, backpacks untouched, bodies posed like exhibits in a private crypt. "Start with the smaller one," Briggs said. Riley nodded, unzipping Lila's pack. It was oddly light. The main compartment yielded a flattened water bottle, a shattered compass, and a torn beanie still clinging to a faint perfume. Then Riley found it, tucked deep in the inner pocket beneath a wad of emergency foil. A small, cloth-bound notebook. Its edges were warped, water-stained, but the pages were intact. The handwriting was tight and angular. Lila's. She flipped through carefully. August 10th. We crossed the ridge. Sam doesn't know I saw the figure again. I pretended not to, but it was closer this time, watching. Always watching. I need to tell him. But how do you explain something that disappears when you blink? Riley's breath hitched. She kept turning. August 12th. We found the structure. I didn't want to go in. I begged him. But Sam thinks it's just an old mine. He said we'd be safe inside, just for a night. He doesn't feel it, the silence. The pressure. Something is wrong here. I had the dream again. The one from when I was a child. The next page was ripped. The entry after that was almost illegible. One word repeated over and over like a scratched record. Forgive us. Forgive us. Forgive us. Riley looked up, her skin crawling. There's more, she said. She opened Sam's pack. Inside, a camping knife, emergency rations, a lighter, and a second notebook. But this one was blank. Every page, empty, like he never got the chance to write what came next. Maria Reyes had been slicing apples when the call came. A soft Sunday morning, sunlight scattered across the kitchen tiles, NPR humming faintly from the radio. Her knife paused mid-air when she saw the caller ID. Sheriff's Department, Eagle County. Her heart didn't race. It stopped. The sheriff's voice was measured, almost too careful. Each word wrapped in gauze. Mrs. Reyes, I'm sorry to inform you, we've found your daughter. For a moment, there was only the buzzing silence of the line. Maria's lips parted, but nothing came out. Bodies were recovered near Northwest Pass. We believe one is Lila. She dropped the knife. It clattered against the tile, slicing into an apple on the way down. Red mixed with red. Maria didn't cry at first. She just stood there, both hands gripping the counter as if it would pull her out of a dream. It wasn't until the sheriff said the name, Sam Calder, that her eyes snapped wide. No, she whispered. No, not him. Ma'am. He was with her? Her voice cracked. They said they went missing together, but I always knew he took her there. Briggs hesitated. There's no sign of a struggle, no clear trauma. We're still gathering evidence. You don't understand, Maria hissed. Her fingers trembled against the counter. She called me 3 days before they left. She almost didn't go. She told me. She was scared. Scared of what? Of him. She collapsed into the kitchen chair, shoulders shaking. The tears came in a single rush, years of buried agony breaking through like a dam. I begged her not to go, Maria sobbed. She said she had something to confess to him, that he wasn't who she thought. Briggs' voice softened. Mrs. Reyes, do you know what she meant by that? No, Maria stared into nothing. But I know my daughter. She would have never followed him into that tunnel. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Unless she thought she had no choice. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Somewhere in the mountains, a mother's scream echoed back after 10 long years. The evidence room at the Eagle County Sheriff's Department smelled like old paper and colder regret. Deputy Riley Monroe sat hunched over a weathered metal table. Manila files spread before her like a patchwork quilt of missed chances. 10 years. 10 years. She flipped through the original missing persons reports for Sam Calder and Lila Reyes, submitted August 18, 2015, 3 days after they were last seen. Riley traced the familiar bureaucratic pattern, timelines, ranger logs, volunteer statements, weather patterns. She saw what wasn't there more than what was. Search grid was tight, she muttered. Too tight. Sheriff Briggs leaned in beside her. Back then, we assumed they veered off trail. High likelihood of injury, animal involvement, exposure. We didn't even consider this. She tapped a faded note in the margin of a report. This ranger, Calder, said he logged a trail warning sign near Northwest Pass the morning after they went missing. Briggs frowned. We assumed they never went that way. Sign was still intact when the second crew came through. But if they did go that way, and that sign had just been posted, then someone might have been trying to keep hikers out, after the fact. She nodded grimly. Someone who knew. Riley pulled out a second report, one never filed through normal channels. It had been scanned into an old database, flagged for lack of credible threat. A local hunter claimed he saw a figure on the ridge, mid-August 2015. Said it didn't move like a man. Said it watched him from the tree line. Said it had something slung over its shoulder. He was dismissed. No follow-up interview. No composite sketch. Briggs exhaled, rubbing his jaw. We missed it. We missed all of it. Riley leaned back, eyes dark. No. Someone wanted us to. They sat in silence for a moment before Riley said it aloud. What if the tunnel wasn't an accident? What if it wasn't just where they died, but where they were meant to die? Briggs didn't answer, because deep down he already knew. The sunlight filtered differently through the trees that morning, harsher, fractured by the canopy overhead. It was the third day of their hike, and Sam's boots were starting to blister. But he said nothing. Lila walked 10 steps ahead, navigating without a map. She claimed to remember the route from a blog she read months ago, some hidden trail only locals knew about. Sam had wanted to stay on the main loop. Safer, easier. But Lila, she craved something else. Here. She pointed to a barely there opening in the undergrowth, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. This is it. Sam paused. There's no marker. Lila turned, one corner of her mouth lifting. That's the point. No one comes this way. He frowned, squinting toward the tree line. You sure this isn't just a deer path? She stepped in anyway, brushing aside ferns and ducking under a fallen pine. Trust me. He followed reluctantly. The terrain shifted as they moved off-trail. The sounds of other hikers faded quickly, replaced by birdsong and the occasional creak of settling branches. They climbed higher, into a region that didn't feel worn or welcoming. The trees grew tighter. The light grew dimmer. The air grew still. Why here? Sam finally asked. Lila slowed but didn't look back. Because I needed to think. And I didn't want anyone else around. He caught up. You've been thinking. Quiet all morning. She stopped and turned, something unreadable in her face. There's something I have to tell you, Sam. But not here. Not yet. He stared at her, frustrated. Is it me? No, she said too fast. But it might change how you see me. Before he could respond, a rustling sound snapped both of their heads toward the brush. Probably just a marmot, Sam said. Lila didn't answer. She was staring at something beyond the trail. A dark shape, tall, still, gone the moment Sam turned to look. You okay? He asked. She nodded quickly, too quickly. They continued walking, unaware that their detour had already taken them past the point of no return. The light inside the tunnel was thick, almost solid particles dancing like ash in the still air. Deputy Riley Monroe adjusted her headlamp and stepped carefully over the police markers outlining the bodies of Sam and Lila. But she wasn't looking at them now. She was focused on the walls. The carvings started 3 feet in, barely visible at first. Symbols. Not letters. Not language. Just deep, deliberate gouges made by something sharp. Each mark dragged violently into the wood beams. Circles, crosses, arrows, hash marks. Some orderly, others wild. Over here, called forensic tech Deanna Wells, crouched near the back. We found something else. Riley followed the narrow beam of light deeper in. The tunnel tightened, almost as if the mountain were closing its mouth behind them. Just before the back wall, the air turned colder again. A second chamber. Collapsed. Thick timbers had caved in, half burying the entrance. But through the debris, Riley could just make out what looked like a secondary room. Reinforced supports, a narrow shelf holding a rusted tin box. And worse, a length of chain still bolted into the rock wall. For what? She asked, more to herself than anyone. Deanna cleared her throat. We found scratch marks inside the shaft. On the beams and... She hesitated. And the stone. Riley moved closer. They weren't just scratches. They were fingernail marks. Long, desperate. Dragging in vertical streaks like someone had tried to claw their way out. Some were high, too high for someone lying down. She turned slowly to face the main chamber again. Something about the layout was wrong. The positioning of the beams, the anchoring, this wasn't a mine shaft. This was a room. Someone built this. Briggs' voice crackled over the radio. You still down there? Riley keyed the mic. Yeah. There's another chamber. Looks like someone tried to collapse it intentionally. A pause. Like they were hiding something? Briggs asked. Riley stared at the nail marks. No, she said softly. Like they were trying to bury it alive. Behind her, the wood groaned softly, almost like a breath. The tunnel had been cordoned off again, this time with stricter perimeter control and tighter security. Riley stood at the shaft's mouth as the sunrise split through the pines, gold bleeding over the rocky soil. She didn't want to go back in. But the techs had found something new. Half buried behind a fallen beam in the secondary chamber, wedged in a gap just wide enough for an arm, was a backpack. Older, dirt-crusted, not matching Sam's or Lila's gear. This one was gray, military style, no name tag, no brand, no identity. Riley crouched over the table as the contents were laid out in sterile silence. First, a burner phone, plastic cracked, battery half-melted from exposure. No contacts, no outgoing calls, but one saved video file, encrypted. Next, a coil of synthetic rope, thick, clean, and newer than the bag itself. Tension still strong, ends neatly burned to prevent fraying. And last, a vial of morphine in a padded metal case, along with a still-capped syringe. Full dosage, pharmaceutical label scratched off. "What the hell?" Riley whispered. Deanna looked up from her notes. "This isn't wilderness survival gear. This is tactical. Planned. Someone brought this for a reason." Briggs stood stiffly across from them, arms folded. Could it have been a rescuer? Someone who tried to reach them but didn't report it? Riley shook her head. No. Rescuers log everything. This pack wasn't dropped. It was hidden. She opened the phone's rear casing and tapped the memory card free. Let's see what our mystery hiker was hiding. Hours later, back in the office, they decrypted the video. It was grainy, shot in near total darkness. The camera panned slowly, shakily. A whispering voice muttered something under breath, too low to understand. Then, suddenly, the image tilted to show a shadowed figure lying motionless in the tunnel, wrapped in cloth. Lila. But she was still breathing. The video shook violently. A scraping sound. The camera turned. Something moved just beyond the beam of light. Then cut to black. Riley leaned back in her chair, throat dry. Someone was there. With them. Watching. Briggs' voice was a rasp. Or waiting. The fire crackled softly between them, but the silence roared louder. Sam sat cross-legged, poking at the embers with a stick. Lila watched him across the flames, her hands buried deep in her fleece sleeves, knuckles white. They were 2 days into the detour. No cell signal. No more marked trails. Just trees, endless and unmoving. But Lila had brought them here on purpose. She had planned this. She just hadn't planned the timing. "I have to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above the crackle. Sam glanced up. "Okay." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Tried again. I'm pregnant." The word hung between them like smoke. He blinked. "Wait, what? Pregnant?" Her voice shook. "About 8 weeks." His stick dropped. His face contorted, half joy, half terror. That's huge, Lil. I mean, are you sure?" She nodded. "Yeah. Took 2 tests before we left." He let out a breathy laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay. Wow. I mean, it's fast, but we'll figure it out. You and me." She didn't respond. "Right?" he asked, suddenly unsure. She looked at him, finally. "Sam, I don't know if it's yours." The fire snapped. His smile died. "What?" "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "It was a mistake. It was one time, before we got serious. But the dates are close and I couldn't lie to you about it." He stood abruptly, walking a few steps away from the fire, hands gripping his hair. "Jesus, Lila, I thought I could bury it," she said, tears in her voice. "But then I started feeling it, the weight, and being out here, it all just, I had to tell you." He turned, eyes wild. "So this whole trip, was it to trap me? Or test me?" "No," she cried. "It was to tell you in private, where it was safe." Sam stared at her, breath shaking. Then, softly, "I trusted you." She wiped her eyes. "I know." He sat back down slowly, the silence colder now. "So what do we do?" Lila looked into the fire. "I think that depends," she whispered. "On who else knows." And deep in the woods, something unseen stirred. Riley turned each page with gloves and reverence, as if the journal might disintegrate beneath her fingertips. The leather was warped from water, the ink faded in places. But the entries, dated sporadically between August 15th and August 30th, 2015, were unmistakably Lila's. The first few pages were raw survival notes. Berries eaten, water boiled, signs of animal tracks. Then, the handwriting began to shift. Sloppier, unsteady. Day 3. Still no signal. Sam won't speak. He just stares at me. I'm afraid to sleep. Day 5. I heard something last night. Something outside the camp. Not an animal. It knew we were here. Riley, read faster. The emotional deterioration bled into every word. Day 7. He says it's all in my head. But I saw footprints. 3 sets. One of them doesn't wear boots. Then came a page with no date, just a single line. If I don't make it back, this isn't an accident. A chill rolled up Riley's spine. But it was the next section that made her stomach knot. The handwriting changed entirely, tight, boxed in. Letters rearranged into symbols, then back again. She realized it wasn't just desperation. It was code. She flipped the journal sideways. Hidden between lines of ink was a faint pattern. Letters circled. A sequence. DONT. TRUST. HIM. She whispered it aloud. Don't trust him. Briggs looked up from across the table. You think she meant Sam? Riley shook her head slowly. Not anymore. I think she meant someone else. She turned another page and stopped. Folded inside was a strip of torn map, marked with an X, deep in the northwest quadrant. Miles beyond where their bodies were found. What the hell is out there? She murmured. Briggs was already dialing a number. Let's find out. But Riley knew something the map didn't say. Lila hadn't just been trying to survive. She'd been trying to leave a message. And now, 10 years later, someone was about to finally read it. The original trail map lay unfolded on the table in the sheriff's office, its creases worn soft by years of touch. Riley stared at it, tracing the red-dotted lines through the Rocky Mountain terrain. Sam and Lila had marked their intended route in highlighter, safe, predictable. But then, the detour. The route they actually took didn't exist on this version. Deanna entered, holding a second map, laminated and yellowed with age. Pulled this from the Ranger Station archives, she said. Dated July 2015. Take a look. Riley laid them side by side. There it was. The key difference. The older map showed an unofficial cut-through, a service trail from the 1960s, long decommissioned. It led toward the northwest ridge, directly toward the collapsed tunnel. But the version Lila and Sam had downloaded to their phones? Clean. Sanitized. No such trail listed. Riley leaned closer. So someone scrubbed it from public versions. Deanna nodded. And not just that. The digital file they used was manipulated. Briggs entered, catching the tail end. What do you mean? I ran the metadata, Deanna said. Their GPS map was modified, uploaded from a spoofed server. Whoever gave it to them wanted them to find that old trail. They were lured, Riley whispered. Briggs frowned. But by who? And why go through the trouble of deleting a forgotten path from public maps? Because that path led to something, Riley said. Something someone didn't want found. Or maybe something someone wanted buried. Deanna tilted her head. You think whoever trapped them built that map? I think, Riley said, rising slowly. Someone orchestrated every step they took once they left that main trail. And we just found proof. She stared at the faded X on the map in the journal again. The tunnel hadn't been a tragic endpoint. It had been a destination. The old man's eyes were pale and flickering, like candlelight reflected on a stream. He smelled faintly of wood smoke and something mustier, like books that had been buried instead of shelved. His name was Earl Johansson, 73, a former backcountry ranger turned hermit. They found him in a rundown cabin clinging to the edge of timberline. His radio long dead, but his memories alive like old ghosts. You won't find M on the new maps, he said, tapping a liver-spotted finger on a topographic spread that Riley had brought. But I remember. Hell, I helped seal one. Riley leaned forward. Seal what? The tunnels. Built in the 60s. Cold War bunkers. Most people think they're mines, but they're deeper, meant to survive a nuclear hit. Supplies, air vents, beds. The works. Briggs frowned. You're saying there are multiple tunnels? Earl chuckled. Rocky Mountains are Swiss cheese if you know where to look. Riley pointed to the area marked in Lila's journal. This one, Northwest Ridge. Was there one there? His gaze darkened. That one should have stayed sealed. The room chilled. I was just 20. Part of a cleanup crew after a cave-in. One of the supply tunnels collapsed, 3 guys got trapped. They were down there for 2 days before we could cut through. Did they survive? Briggs asked. 2 did. But they weren't the same. Wouldn't talk. Wouldn't go underground again. The 3rd never found him. But we heard him. Riley's brow furrowed. Heard him? Earl nodded slowly, voice dropping. We were above him. Thought he was scratching for help. Then the noises changed. Rhythmic. Almost like talking. But he was the only one down there. They said nothing. Something happened in those tunnels, he continued. They sealed them. Erased M from maps. Threatened us with prison if we ever spoke about it. Briggs stood, tense. Why talk now? Earl looked at Riley, eyes sharp despite his age. Because someone unsealed it. And now the voices are back. A long pause. Then he added, just don't go listening too long. Outside, wind howled through the trees like something whispering from beneath the earth. The air had turned brittle, sharp with cold and silence. Snow fell in listless flurries, no longer beautiful but smothering. Sam's boots crunched as he stormed back into the small camp clearing. Lila looked up from the fire she was trying and failing to keep alive. You lied to me, he said flatly. She blinked. Sam. He pulled the phone from his coat pocket, the burner she thought she had hidden inside the lining of her pack. The one she'd promised she left at home. It was buried. Why would you even bring this? Lila stood slowly. I didn't bring it for calls. Oh, I know. He threw it at her feet. I turned it on. Guess what popped up? A message. Her breath caught. What message? He stepped closer, voice trembling now. Not with fear, but rage. 2 days after the trailhead. Tunnel entrance should be visible. I'll find you when he's asleep. The words struck like a gunshot. She said nothing. Who sent that, Lila? He asked. Who the hell knew where we'd be? Who were you planning to meet out here? Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Was it him? He shouted. The father? Were you going to run? No, she said finally. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Lila sank to her knees in the snow, the wind biting at her skin. I didn't plan it this way. I just needed answers. I thought if I could talk to him one last time. You brought me out here to lie to my face in the middle of nowhere. You let me fall in love with something that wasn't real. Tears streaked down her cheeks. I loved you. I still do. His expression cracked, just for a moment. But then he turned, pacing away from the fire. Behind them, the forest creaked. A sound too soft to name. Watching. Waiting. And the snow kept falling. The voicemail was barely 12 seconds long. No ID. No callback number. Just static and then a distorted male voice. You never should have opened it. Riley hit replay again, but the message was no clearer. Her fingers tightened on the phone. The voice had come through just hours after Wade Krieger, the wilderness guide who discovered the tunnel entrance during a rockslide survey, failed to check in with the rangers. His Jeep was still parked outside the trailhead. Doors locked. Gear untouched. No signs of struggle. No footprints leading away. He had vanished. Briggs rubbed a hand down his face. He had a satellite phone, GPS tracker, emergency beacon. All dead. Dead as in turned off? Riley asked. Dead as in fried. Like something pulsed them at once. She paced in the narrow operations cabin. We sent him back out for follow-up scans. If someone was watching the site. They silenced him, Briggs said. Deanna entered with a laptop, her face pale. I ran voice analysis on the message. No match in any law enforcement database. But the waveform pattern, the noise floor, it matches something we saw in the background of the old tunnel video. Riley froze. You're saying the person who filmed Lila is the one who made this call? Not just that. Deanna turned the screen toward them. Listen. She boosted the gain. The static cleared slightly, and underneath the distorted voice was something else. Low, barely audible. A whisper, repeating 2 words. Still down. Riley's spine tightened. Still down where? Deanna whispered. In the tunnel. Briggs grabbed his coat. We need to shut it down. Lock it. Get the feds back on it. Riley shook her head. No. That's exactly what someone wants. To scare us off. Make it vanish again. She looked toward the mountains beyond the window, already cloaked in fog. We're not backing off, she said. Because if someone took Wade, like they took Sam and Lila, then they're not just watching us. They're hunting anyone who gets too close. The storm outside intensified. Trees groaned. And deep in the ridge, something moved again. Riley ducked under the rotted steel arch, her flashlight beam cutting across the cold, dripping black of the tunnel interior. Beside her, Deanna ran a handheld scanner across the walls, but it was Riley who spotted it first. Not etched, not painted, burned, an unnatural mark, seared deep into the ancient support beam, as though cauterized by flame but without scorching the surrounding surface. Riley knelt and traced it with her gloved fingers. A circle, enclosed by 6 jagged lines radiating outward like broken compass points. Inside the circle, a vertical slit, almost eye-like. Got something, she murmured. Deanna looked closer and froze. That's not just vandalism. I've seen this before, Riley said. Not in any police file, but in one of my dad's old journals. Deanna blinked. Your dad? The search and rescue climber. He tracked fringe groups in the 70s, Riley explained. There was a mountaineering sect, small, secretive, called themselves the Ascent. Mostly ex-military survivalists, spiritual fanatics, obsessed with elevation and purity. They believed the higher you climbed, the closer you got to something they called the still voice. Briggs, who had just caught up, scoffed. Like a death cult? Not exactly. They didn't kill each other, but they vanished. Every last one of them. My father found their last camp at 11,000 feet. Food still hot in bowls. No footprints leaving. Deanna turned pale. You think they built this place? No, Riley said. But they used it. The symbol, they called it the Eye of Descent. They believed the mountains hid a passage between life and silence. Briggs shook his head. Mountains don't whisper. Riley looked up, her light tracing more faint symbols carved higher along the arch. Tell that to the people who never came back, she whispered. A sudden gust moved through the tunnel. Not wind, but pressure. As if something had shifted far below, disturbing old air. From deeper within, the sound of metal creaked, slow and deliberate, like a door unlocking. The storm came fast, swallowing the ridge in a matter of minutes. Wind howled like it had a voice of its own, feral, ancient. Sam pulled Lila behind a boulder as snow drove sideways in white sheets. They were already soaked to the bone. There, he shouted over the gale, pointing toward a dark cut in the mountainside. Shelter! They scrambled across the scree, boots slipping, eyes burning from wind. The opening was small, half covered in rockfall and debris, but just wide enough to slip through. Sam held back a torn tarp flapping like a shredded flag. Inside, the world changed. Silence dropped like a curtain. The tunnel was colder than outside, but still, mercifully still. Lila collapsed against the stone wall, shivering. Sam lit a flare, its red glow staining the old, rusted steel ribs of the tunnel interior. What is this place? She whispered. Sam knelt, inspecting an old supply crate. Not marked on any map. Looks like some kind of abandoned shelter. Or mine. Lila pulled her coat tighter. It doesn't feel like a mine. She wasn't wrong. The air didn't carry dust or the usual staleness. Instead, it was too clean. Hollow. Listening. They made camp there, if you could call it that. A torn sleeping bag, a flickering lantern, a pack of trail mix between them. Sam drifted to sleep fast, exhaustion dragging him under. But Lila couldn't. Somewhere in the stillness, she heard it. The faint sound. At first, she thought it was the wind sneaking through cracks. But it wasn't. It was rhythmic, slow, like the creaking of a far-off hinge. She turned her head slowly toward the deeper dark of the tunnel, beyond the reach of their light. Tap. She stiffened. Then again closer. Tap, drag, tap. Her breath caught. She reached for Sam's arm, but he didn't stir. She sat frozen, eyes wide, heart thudding. The sound stopped. Then a new one began. A voice whispered, right behind her. She spun, nothing. Only the flare sputtering low, and Sam breathing deep. But she knew what she heard. And the tunnel was no longer empty. The rope lay coiled like a serpent beside the collapsed wall, thick, weather-stained, and unmistakably old. Riley crouched beside it, gloved fingers brushing along the frayed end. It wasn't the kind of rope used by hikers, not standard climbing gear. This was placed here, she murmured. Deanna stepped closer, scanning it with her forensic app. You're right. Fiber strands. This is military grade. Type 3 nylon. Manufactured around 2006. Briggs leaned in. That's a long time to sit undisturbed. No mold, no full decay, Deanna said. Which means someone used it after Lila and Sam disappeared. Recently. Riley's jaw tightened. Get it tested for DNA. Every inch. Later, back at the mobile lab, Deanna's voice came through the speaker, shaking just slightly. I ran the samples. Got a partial match. Riley straightened. To who? Deanna hesitated. You're not going to believe it. The rope contains epithelial cells from a man named Ethan Crowell. Briggs blinked. That name's familiar. He should be, Deanna said. He's on the federal missing persons list. Last seen in Colorado 2009. Prime suspect in a series of disappearances, abductions, 2 confirmed victims. Never found. Riley felt a cold tide rise in her gut. Ethan Crowell vanished. Right around this area, Deanna continued. The last cell ping from his phone was 10 miles from this tunnel. Briggs looked sick. So you're telling me that a known predator may have found this place before Sam and Lila? And possibly used it, Riley added. Made it his hunting ground. They were silent. The implications hung heavy. But if Crowell disappeared too, Deanna said softly, then something happened to him down there. Riley looked at the rope again in her mind's eye. Not a remnant. A breadcrumb. This place didn't just kill people, she whispered. It drew them in. Briggs turned toward the snowy ridgeline. And whatever's inside, it chooses who stays. Lila's handwriting wavered. The lines of ink unsteady as though her hand shook with every letter. March 11th, 2015, Night 3. He's asleep. Again. I don't know how he does it. Sam curls up in the cold like it's just another hike. But I can't. Not when I keep hearing it. It's not the wind. And it's not animals. She paused, listening again. The fire had long died out, and only a dim orange glow from the flare they cracked an hour ago remained. Shadows breathed in and out with every flicker. The dark was thick, felt alive. She continued writing. Tonight, I heard something breathing in the dark. Not Sam. Not me. A third rhythm. Not fast like panic. Slow. Deep. Too deep to be human. Her pen hovered. It was behind me. I turned and nothing was there. But I could still feel it. Like warmth on the back of my neck. I kept still for a long time. Didn't even blink. Then a new line. More erratic. It exhaled into my ear. Lila clutched the journal tighter, fighting the rising tide in her chest. She looked at Sam, still lying curled beneath his jacket. Oblivious. If he felt anything, he didn't show it. She wanted to wake him, but what would she say? Something's breathing near us? I think the dark is alive? He'd think she was unraveling. Maybe she was. Still, she kept writing. It waits until I'm alone. Until I'm the only one awake. Last night it whispered. Just one word. Stay. Tonight, she swallowed. Said my name. Her hand trembled now, writing faster, sharper. I think this place knows me. I think I was meant to come back here. Maybe it remembers him too. Maybe it's not finished with us. She closed the journal slowly and pulled it to her chest. The silence returned, dense, watching. Then the sound again. Breathing. Just beyond the reach of light. 3 patterns. Only 2 hearts. The sound didn't register at first. A low rumble. Like distant thunder rolling across rock. Sam sat up groggily, blinking into the darkness. Lila was already on her feet, headlamp flickering as she scanned the ceiling. Then it happened. A violent crack, followed by a cascade of stone. "Move!" Sam yelled, lunging toward her just as the wall behind them gave way. The tunnel collapsed in a choking roar of dust and rock. The flare was buried instantly, leaving them in near-total blackness. Only Lila's headlamp remained, flickering, unreliable. When the silence returned, it was absolute. "Lila?" Sam's voice was hoarse. "You okay?" She coughed. Her voice cracked. "My leg. I think it's pinned." He crawled to her, running his hands blindly along her thigh. A heavy chunk of debris had caught her just above the ankle. She winced when he touched it. "Not broken," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Just crushed in." She nodded faintly, teeth clenched. Sam stood, fumbling for the emergency radio in his pack. He toggled it on. "Base, this is Sam Foster. Do you read? Emergency. We're trapped in a collapsed tunnel. Coordinates. Static." He changed the frequency. Tried again. Again. Nothing. Lila swallowed hard. "Try the flare gun." Sam grabbed it, stepped back toward the newly sealed entrance, and fired straight up the shaft of the tunnel. The light hissed upward, and slammed into solid rock only 10 feet above. No sky. No escape. They were sealed in. Panic surged for a second, but Sam shoved it down. Okay. We dig. We conserve power. Someone will come." Lila's breath trembled. "What if no one knows where we are?" Sam paused. He had told his brother they'd be offline for a few days. He hadn't given exact coordinates. It was supposed to be a getaway. Off-grid. Romantic. Now it was a tomb. "We just stay calm," he said, kneeling beside her. "They'll come." But outside, the wind covered all sound. And somewhere in the dark, something breathed again. Not panic. Not fear. Presence. Lila pressed her pen harder against the page now, the lines darker, more erratic than before. The cold had gotten into her hands, stiffened her fingers, but not enough to stop her from writing what she needed to, what she'd held back. He says this was an accident, that the trail was blocked by snow, that the GPS app rerouted us. But I saw the old topo map in his bag 2 nights ago. Physical one. Folded. Stained. Marked. She looked at him as he slept just feet away, chest rising and falling in calm rhythm. Sam knew about the tunnel before we got here. She closed her eyes. Flashes of the hike came back. How he'd insisted they keep going despite the early snow. How he'd grown quiet when she mentioned they were too far off trail. How he'd rushed them forward with fake optimism. "I thought he wanted time with me. Just us. But something is off." I saw a name on the edge of that map. Crowell. Scribbled in ink. Circled. Lila's stomach turned. Sam had talked about him before. Ethan Crowell, the missing climber, the man whose name came up in a case Sam once helped research during his internship at the Forest Service. He always said Crowell wasn't dead, just hiding, that if you followed the right signs you could find where he went. Lila's pen quivered now, breath coming faster. Sam didn't bring me here to reconnect. He brought me here because he wanted to find this place. He brought me here as bait. Her chest seized. A terrible thought formed. What if he didn't expect me to leave? What if he's waiting for someone to show up? She set the journal down and stared into the black beyond the tunnel light. Sam stirred behind her. "Can't sleep?" he mumbled. "No," she whispered without turning. Her hands trembled, because now she didn't know what was worse, being trapped in this place with something outside, or being trapped here with him. Deanna crouched near the mouth of the tunnel, her breath fogging in the cold morning air. The frost still clung to the edge of the collapsed wall. But that wasn't what caught her eye. It was the stone, half buried in loose scree, smeared with a deep brown stain that had turned almost black. She pulled on fresh gloves and gently lifted it. Flat, heavy, one jagged edge. Deanna frowned. Not from the cave-in, she muttered. This was used. She bagged it quickly and signaled to Riley and Briggs, who were just returning from a higher trail pass. Find something? Briggs asked, hands tucked under his arms for warmth. Deanna nodded grimly. Blood on a stone. Looks recent compared to the rest of the decay. Riley took the bagged rock and turned it over, studying the dried maroon patch. From one of them? Likely. It's close to where the entrance collapsed, but the splatter pattern. It's directional. Deanna paused. Whoever got hit wasn't buried. They were facing the entrance. Blunt trauma? Riley asked. We'll know more once the lab finishes, Deanna said. But it's not an accident. Someone was attacked. Briggs looked uneasy. You're saying this wasn't just exposure or starvation down there? Deanna looked at both of them, voice low. One of them didn't die naturally. There was a silence. The kind that says everything. Riley turned slowly back to the tunnel, now shadowed by morning fog. If that blood doesn't match Sam or Lila, she said, we're dealing with a third person. Deanna hesitated. I ran the early tissue analysis on the skeletal remains. One set shows classic signs of hypothermia. The other has cranial trauma. A fracture along the back of the skull. Consistent with this rock? Briggs asked. Deanna nodded. Perfectly. Riley's eyes narrowed. So someone wanted to leave, Briggs added darkly. And someone else didn't let them. The audio file had degraded. Age, water damage, and time had eroded its edges. But the voice was unmistakable. Lila. Riley sat alone in the mobile command van, headphones pressed tight against her ears, eyes locked on the waveform as it pulsed across the screen. Deanna had recovered the file from the burner phone found buried in the tunnel debris. No ID, no logs, just this single saved voicemail. It began with static. A few seconds of nothing but white noise. Then her voice, breathless, fragile, whispered as if every word was a sin she wasn't allowed to speak. If someone finds this, I need you to listen. Please. Click. A shuffle. The faint sound of dripping water. We're not alone in here. I don't mean animals. I mean, there's someone else. And he's not who he said he was. Riley froze. He lied to me. Sam, he's not Sam anymore. He hasn't been for a while. I think he brought me here for a reason. Then a crack of something hard, maybe stone, followed by a gasp. He keeps looking at me like he's waiting, like he knows what's coming, like he's seen it before. Silence. Then a word that chilled Riley to the bone. Crowell. He says the name in his sleep, over and over. Sometimes he laughs after. And last night, I found him standing at the mouth of the tunnel, just listening. Like he was waiting for someone to speak back. A heavy breath. She was crying now, but quiet, controlled. If this is the last thing I ever say, know this. He brought me here to feed something. And now, I think it wants him too. The audio clicked off. Dead air. No goodbye. Riley sat back slowly, removing the headphones as if they'd grown hot against her skin. Her reflection stared back from the monitor, pale and shaken. Briggs stepped inside. Anything? She turned the screen to him, voice low. Lila knew. Before the end. She knew. The cold was no longer just around them, it was inside them. Sam sat cross-legged, staring blankly at the tunnel wall as if it might open a door. His lips were cracked, pale. His eyes flickered with that wild, distant light Lila had come to dread. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. I think I saw light last night, he mumbled. A glimmer, just past the bend. I followed it, but... He laughed, dry and sharp. It moved. It moved. Lila. She stayed quiet, stirred the last of the protein powder into a half bottle of melted snow, handed it to him. He didn't drink. I think this place was a passage, he said. You know? Like a border. Between here and whatever's next. I don't mean death. Not exactly. Lila sat beside him, tucking her hands into her sleeves. Her fingers were numb, her thoughts sharper than ever. Where are your boots, Sam? She asked softly. He blinked, looked down. Gone. What the? I left them right. I haven't seen them, she lied. He got up too fast, staggered, caught himself. Walked barefoot across jagged rock. Lila's breath caught. Sam, don't. He turned to her, eyes blazing. You took them. Why? Why would you do that? To keep you from killing yourself, she said. You're not thinking straight. You haven't been. He stepped toward her. She flinched, but he only collapsed to his knees, crumpled with exhaustion. I just wanted to find something real, he said. Prove Crowell existed. That I wasn't crazy. That there's something bigger out here than all of us. Lila crouched beside him. Her voice cracked. There is something bigger. And it wants us to die here. He looked up slowly, a tremor of lucidity in his gaze. Then maybe we give it what it wants. She stood, backed away. I'm not ready to die, she said. Sam nodded. I think I already have. She turned before he could see her cry, walked to the far end of the tunnel, where she'd hidden his boots in the shadows, beneath stones. Not to save him. Not entirely. But to see if he'd ever ask for them again like the man she used to love. He never did. It wasn't on any map. Tunnel 7C was barely a crawl space, hidden behind a loose shelf of limestone that had sheared away during the collapse. The discovery came by accident, as Deanna's team cleared debris from the far wall and noticed airflow behind the rocks. She and Briggs exchanged a look. Another chamber? He asked, adjusting his helmet light. Let's find out. The opening was just wide enough to squeeze through sideways. Deanna went first, her boots crunching over grit, flashlight sweeping across the tight space. The air inside was different, stale, yes, but also warmer, like something had disturbed the stillness. The light found a wall, then bones. Briggs cursed softly behind her. Jesus! 3 skeletons, laid out deliberately, almost ceremonially. Each set of remains was partially covered in a mildewed sleeping bag. One had a small rusted compass still clenched in its fingers. Another, just bone and tatters, had a carved medallion hanging from what was left of a neck cord. Deanna knelt, breath shallow. These aren't Sam and Lila, she whispered. Briggs squatted beside her, inspecting the long-decayed packs and personal items. That one's gear looks mid-90s. Maybe earlier. Deanna turned slowly, eyes sweeping the space. This wasn't a place of last resort. This was a shrine. Who the hell brought them here? Briggs asked. She spotted something half buried in dust, leather-bound and crumbling. A field notebook. Deanna pulled it out carefully. Inside, faded scrawl in tight script. E. Crowell, March 1995. Her blood ran cold. Briggs noticed her freeze. What is it? She showed him the name. He went pale. Wait, that's the guy, Sam's theory. The one who disappeared 30 years ago. Deanna flipped further into the notebook. Symbols. Names. Repeated phrases. One stood out, scrawled across the final page in frantic, looping ink. The tunnel feeds. The tunnel remembers. A long silence. Briggs swallowed. You think Sam found this? Brought Lila here because of this? Deanna stared back into the dark mouth of Tunnel 7C. I think he didn't find it by accident. She rose, voice grave. I think he was following it home. The body was found buried in the farthest corner of Tunnel 7C, behind a wall of crumbled slate that looked intentionally stacked. Like a crypt, not a collapse. Briggs was the first to see the boot sole half jutting from the rubble. He called Deanna over, and together they unearthed it slowly. Not with urgency but reverence. Because this one felt different. The skeleton was slouched, arms crossed over its chest, as if it had died guarding something. Next to it, preserved by some miracle of dryness and cold, lay a cracked leather-bound journal. Black cover, initials embossed faintly. Ik. Deanna's throat tightened. Ethan Crowell. She opened the book with surgical care. The first page was filled with dates, every few days logged obsessively. Then names. Not his. Other names. Crossed out in thick, hard strokes. As if erased. On the 5th page, a line stood alone. The mountain takes what it is owed. Briggs hovered behind her, reading over her shoulder. Holy hell! Further in, the entries changed. They became more erratic. Descriptive. A tone emerged, detached. Observational. Clinical. February 12th. Male, 29. Loud. Unprepared. She trusts him. He does not trust himself. February 14th. She's stronger than he is. Quieter. Watches everything. Wrote something down when he wasn't looking. Deanna's skin went cold. These are notes. About Sam and Lila. Briggs looked horrified. You're saying he was watching them? From inside the tunnel. Or waiting for them? She whispered. Another entry. February 16th. He will turn. I've seen it before. The tunnel makes them desperate. Desperation changes the skin first. Then the eyes. He'll hurt her if I don't intervene. Briggs sat back on his heels. He tried to save her. No, Deanna said. He tried to contain them, like the others before. She turned to the last page. Fresh ink, barely faded. A shaky hand. If you're reading this, I failed again. But the tunnel never forgets. Another one always comes. Another will feed it. She looked to the wall behind them. Bones, stone, darkness, and something else. Briggs spotted it too. Deanna. There's another passage behind the rubble. The tunnel wasn't done. He'd watched them for days before they ever knew he was there. From the tree line, behind rocks, beneath the crest of the ridge, always just out of sight. The man moved with the terrain like he was part of it. A shadow. A presence older than the couple who'd stumbled too far into a place they didn't understand. He watched her. Not him, never Sam. The girl. Lila. She reminded him of someone he once tried to forget. Someone from the years before the tunnel had called him back. She had the same kind of silence in her eyes. A calm that looked like still water but ran deeper than anyone dared measure. That calm was what drew him. Not love. Not lust. Possession. He'd tracked them as they wandered off course. Knew Sam had brought her there under a lie. Knew she had figured it out. He watched them argue near the pass. Watched Sam throw the map down like a child denied dessert. The third man, Crowell, though that name no longer felt like his, had seen dozens like them over the years. Young couples. Idealists. Explorers. All wandering toward the same mouth. The tunnel feeds on them. But first it starves them. He didn't remember when he first heard the whispers echo from inside the mountain. Maybe 1995. Maybe earlier. Maybe they'd always been there, just waiting for someone to listen. He didn't stalk the couple out of malice. He believed, deep down, he was a keeper of balance. A witness. But something changed when Lila cried that night. Softly. Into the firelight. The third man had gripped the shaft of his field knife tighter. Buried the sound of her weeping in his chest like it belonged to him. When Sam raised his voice, just once, Crowell stepped closer to the tunnel. Closer to her. He wasn't supposed to intervene. But some things can't be observed forever. Especially when they look at you like they want to be saved. The lockbox was rusted shut. Half buried beneath a cairn of flat stones just outside the original trailhead. Briggs had nearly missed it. Just another anomaly on a path long forgotten. Until he spotted the telltale glint of oxidized steel beneath the frost. Deanna pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, one weatherproof journal, sealed in plastic. No name, no timestamp, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Sam's. She didn't speak as she flipped to the first page. Just sat down on a nearby boulder, wind tousling her hair while the mountain stared blankly back. To whoever finds this, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Riley stood behind her, eyes scanning the valley below. The tunnel entrance now felt like a wound in the earth. Lila was right. I brought her here under false pretenses. I said we were hiking, that we'd unplug, reconnect. But what I really wanted was proof. Each line was raw, messy, scribbled in haste but soaked in guilt. The Crowell theory, it wasn't just some blog rabbit hole. Consumed me. I thought I'd find bones, relics, symbols, something to vindicate the obsession that ruined every part of my life. I didn't care about the risk, or the cold, or even if she got scared. That was the sickness. Deanna turned the page, slower now. But then the tunnel changed me. The silence wasn't silence. The dark wasn't empty. It showed me things. Not visions, memories. Mine. Twisted. Magnified. I started to see Lila as the enemy. A barrier to the truth. I thought I could hear the mountain whisper my name. She swallowed. Hard. I didn't kill her. Not with a weapon. But I let her die. That's worse. She begged me to turn back. She begged me to help her. And I told her the cold would pass. I watched her fade and I did nothing. Because I thought the truth was worth it. A final line. Stark. Uneven. Almost scrawled. The mountain doesn't want proof. It wants sacrifice. Riley crouched beside her. We were never going to find a clean ending, were we? Deanna closed the journal. No. Just the pieces he couldn't bury. By the time the story hit the national media, the tunnel had been sealed. A cold-weather press conference was held at the ranger station. Deanna stood flanked by officials, her expression neutral, but the fire behind her eyes refused to dim. Reporters swarmed in, armed with questions that wanted answers, not truth. Were they murdered? Was it a cult? Did Sam kill Lila? Was this Crowell man real? They weren't ready for the real answers. Not the ones carved into the bones of that mountain. Not the ones whispered by dead air and frozen tunnels. The public called it a tragedy. Online sleuths called it a conspiracy. Forums speculated wildly. Some said Sam and Lila had discovered a hidden government lab. Others swore it was ritualistic, tied to pagan symbols found in Crowell's journal. There were podcasts, Netflix deal rumors. A docuseries teaser dropped within days. But the truth, the real human truth, was Messier. Lila's personal journal, recovered from the tunnel with water-damaged pages, told a different story than the national narrative. She had planned to leave Sam. In quiet entries scrawled during nights he slept with his back to the fire, Lila wrote of fear. Not of the tunnel, but of Sam's unraveling. Of how he changed even before the hike. How obsession warped his kindness. How he looked through her. I still love him, but it's the love you give to a house you're planning to sell. You care for it until it's no longer yours. Sam, in his final note, had claimed to love her until the end. Claimed he never laid a hand on her. But his own journal also told another buried truth. She saw something down there before I did. That's what broke me. She didn't need the tunnel to lose herself. She already knew what was coming. They had both kept secrets. They both felt betrayed. And in the end, the mountain had devoured both the truth and the lies, leaving only fragments behind. In a world hungry for resolution, all it offered was silence. And the silence said more than words ever could. The audio file was corrupted badly, recovered from a frostbitten recorder buried near the final chamber. The waveform was jagged, distorted with static and echo. Deanna sat in the ranger station's back room, headphones on, eyes closed. Just listening. A voice cracked through the noise. Muffled. Male. Sam. I don't know how much time I have. The light's almost gone. His breathing was heavy, trembling. She could hear something wet in his lungs. Maybe blood. Maybe fear. I tried to be the strong one, the believer. I thought if I led her here, the truth would redeem everything. My failures. My emptiness. A long pause. A sob. Raw. But Lila, she wasn't just following me. She was watching me, waiting for the moment I'd snap. I saw it in her eyes, that knowing sadness. Deanna blinked, tears quietly building. She always saw through me, even before the mountain. Even when I proposed, and I knew she said yes more out of pity than passion. I ignored it. Pretended love was enough. The audio cracked violently, wind screaming across stone. Then quiet. You never really knew me, Sam whispered. And I never gave you the chance. Silence again. 10 seconds. 15. Then, There's something here with me now. I don't know if it's real, or just what I deserve. It doesn't speak. It just listens. Like the mountain. The faint clatter. The recorder slipping. Or being set down. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for lying. For leading you into this. I thought obsession made me brave. It just made me a coward with a compass. The final line came so softly, Deanna had to rewind 3 times. If they find this, tell her I didn't leave. I stayed. I stayed until the dark became home. The tape ended. Deanna pulled the headphones off slowly. Across from her, Riley waited in silence. She looked up. He didn't run. Riley nodded. No. He confessed. Outside, the snow began again. Soft, slow, like breath returning to a body long buried. The DNA results arrived on a Thursday morning. Quiet, anticlimactic. Deanna opened the email without ceremony, expecting confirmation, closure. Instead, what stared back at her was a new fracture in the narrative. No fetal tissue, no pregnancy, no signs there ever had been. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, motionless. It took a full minute for the implications to settle into her bones. Lila had never been pregnant, but she told Sam she was, and that changed everything. Deanna met Riley at the memorial installation, a temporary plaque placed at the edge of the trail, overlooking the pass where the couple was last seen alive. He read the report, then read it again. She lied to him. Deanna didn't nod, didn't flinch, just stared out at the jagged skyline like it might answer for her. Or maybe, she murmured. She lied to test him. Riley frowned. What do you mean? She saw the obsession in his eyes, knew he was slipping deeper into it. Maybe she wanted to see if anything, even a baby, could bring him back to the surface. Riley exhaled hard. And when it didn't, she gave up. The wind curled around them like a warning. What if the baby story wasn't a lie out of manipulation, but a last-ditch act of hope? A woman's final attempt to tether a man she loved to something real? And failing? And in that failure, maybe she saw the truth. Sam hadn't brought her to the mountain to build a future. He brought her there to feed the past. Later, alone, Deanna sat in her car and reopened Lila's journal. On a back page, nearly illegible, I told him I was pregnant because I wanted to believe it could matter to him. But even when I said it, he looked past me, past us, like something behind me was whispering louder. Deanna closed the book gently, her hands trembling now. Not from cold, but from understanding. Lila's survival instinct wasn't just physical. It was emotional. She had tried to save them both, using the only truth Sam might still care about. But the mountain had already claimed him. The woman walked into the ranger station like she was stepping back into a nightmare. Diane Whitmore, Lila's mother, hadn't returned to Colorado in over a decade. Not since the divorce. Not since her daughter stopped returning calls. But now she stood before Deanna with something clenched in her hand. A photograph. A faded, wrinkled Polaroid. A younger Lila, maybe 12, smiling awkwardly next to a tall man in a ranger uniform, one arm slung stiffly around her shoulders. Her father. Deanna blinked. You said you'd never met Crowell. I didn't, Diane said, her voice tight. Not by that name. She laid the photo down. That man's name is Marcus Elwood. He was a fire ranger. Worked the northern range. Married me when Lila was a baby. Disappeared when she was 15. Just vanished. Riley leaned forward. He abandoned you? Diane shook her head. He left us. But he didn't disappear. Lila found out he was living off the grid. Writing manifestos. Talking about listening places and the voice of stone. I thought it was just more of his madness. Deanna's breath caught. You think Marcus Elwood and Ethan Crowell are the same man? I know they are. Look at the photo. That's him. And Lila knew too. That's why she agreed to go. She thought Sam would bring her to him. Silence filled the room like cold water. She wanted to face him, to ask him why he left, why he never looked back. She didn't care about Sam's obsession. She had her own. Deanna's fingers tightened on the photo. So the man in the tunnel wasn't just a myth. He was her father. Diane nodded, her voice breaking. She went up that mountain to bury a ghost. She just didn't know how many were waiting for her. Outside, the wind howled like a child calling through a locked door. Some stories end in discovery, some in justice, but this one was always going to end in reckoning. And reckoning doesn't wait for the snow to thaw. When the thaw finally came, it didn't arrive gently. It crashed down in sheets, melting months of silence into rushing streams and breaking ice. What had been buried by snow was suddenly bare, and the mountain began to give up its secrets. A ranger named Calloway was the one who found it. A remote trapper's cabin, half collapsed under snowdrift, only accessible now that the road was clear. The door hung by a single hinge, creaking as he pushed it open. Inside, mildew, rotting for pelts, scattered maps, and a box, weatherproof, locked tight with rusted clasps. Inside the box, photographs, hundreds of them, printed on old 35mm film stock. Every image carefully labeled with dates scrawled in the margins. Deanna and Riley spread them across a work table in the ranger station. Gloves on, silence thick. The first were of wildlife. Elks, wolves, hikers. Then came the shift. Lila and Sam, photographed from a distance. On the trail, at their camp. Candid shots, unaware, vulnerable. Dozens taken days before they vanished. One photo was particularly haunting. Lila at dusk, alone near the stream, her face turned slightly to the side, as if she heard something just before the shutter clicked. She looked peaceful, and watched. Riley tapped the corner of the image. These aren't chance sightings. He followed them. Deanna nodded, jaw tight. He was cataloging them, like specimens. The timestamps proved what they feared. Someone had been living in that cabin, watching the trail, waiting, not just this year but years before. There were photos of other couples, other hikers, some still missing. This isn't about one obsession, she whispered. It's a pattern. A journal was found in the floorboards, its pages barely legible. In one entry, a line stood out in charcoal pencil. They come to the mountain with their sins. I only help it listen. Deanna stared at the photos, the faces frozen in time. The mountain hadn't simply taken them. It had been fed. And someone, maybe Marcus Elwood, maybe Crowell, maybe someone worse, had been doing the feeding. The symbol wasn't just carved into the tunnel wall. It was also branded, deep and deliberate, into a piece of driftwood recovered from a riverbed 5 miles west of the trailhead. Burned into the bark like a warning long ignored. It matched exactly. A circle bisected by a downward-pointing triangle. A variant, Riley noted, of an ancient alchemical glyph. Not quite pagan. Not quite tribal. Something in between. Something assembled. Deanna took the image to an anthropologist at CU Boulder. The professor stared at it too long, then slid a folder across the desk. Inside, photos from an obscure 1972 case. Unpublished, labeled, Spiritual Ascension Gatherings, Whisper Range. Inside those old black and whites, men and women in hiking gear standing near the same mountain. Same terrain. Same symbol burned into their makeshift flags. There was one face that reappeared in every frame. Deanna tracked him down to a care facility outside Fort Collins. His name was Halden Mercer, 86 years old, former mountaineer, diagnosed with early-stage dementia but lucid when the topic of the tunnels came up. They weren't ours, Halden said, voice rough with time. We just found them. He sat forward, trembling. We thought they were sacred. We thought the silence in there meant something. So we tested people. Told them to go in alone. Stay till they heard the stones speak. Deanna leaned in. You called it a test of spirit? Halden nodded. Some came out crying. Some never came out. We thought it made them pure. Made them ready. Ready for what? Riley asked. Halden stared at the window, eyes glassy. Whatever was underneath. Deanna pulled out Lila's photo. He didn't recognize her. But when she showed him the journal Crowell left behind, he winced. That boy, Marcus, he twisted it. Said the tunnels weren't just tests. Said they were mirrors. He saw his own God in the dark. Silence fell heavy. How many went in? Deanna asked. Halden's voice cracked. Enough to keep it fed. The ones who watched weren't gone. They had waited. They had watched others walk in, knowing they might not walk out. And worst of all, they believed it was necessary. The journal was stained with meltwater and ash, pages curling like tired leaves. Deanna sat alone on the overlook where the last confirmed photo of Sam and Lila had been taken. She'd hiked up at dawn, alone, bringing only the journal and a recorder. She pressed record and opened the final page. Lila's handwriting was shaky. The ink faded, but her voice, imagined now in the still mountain air, felt stronger than ever. If you find this, maybe you've found us too. I don't know how long we've been down here. Days, hours, it doesn't feel like time moves anymore. Sam's not himself. Or maybe he's more himself than I ever saw before. He thinks we're chosen, that the silence is some kind of blessing. But it isn't. It's a mirror. It reflects back what you carry. And Sam carried something I couldn't lift anymore. Deanna's throat tightened as she kept reading aloud. I came here for answers. About my father. About why he vanished. About why men disappear into silence and call it meaning. And the truth is worse than madness. They heard something in these tunnels. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It doesn't shout. It doesn't ask. It waits. And when you're finally hollow enough, it steps in. I lied to Sam. There was no baby. I needed him to care again. Needed him to see me before he disappeared into myth. But I was already fading too, wasn't I? So if someone finds this, if someone climbs into the silence and decides to listen, then let this be my only truth. We were never supposed to leave, but maybe now, someone will finally see us. Deanna stopped reading. The wind picked up slightly, brushing her hair back. The sun split through the trees, a golden slash across stone and bone. She stood, pressed stop, and walked down the trail, leaving the journal on the overlook. So others could hear, so someone would remember, so Lila would not be just another name lost in the tunnel.